It's an obvious understatement to say that watching other people play games has been popularized in recent years thanks to streaming. But the whole concept of gathering around to watch your friends play games has been a thing since video games were a thing. There are always going to be challenges, puzzles, thrills, and cheer-worthy spectacles best enjoyed as a group. Here are 10 games that, like many things in life, are more fun with friends, even if technically one person is controlling the action. I'm Jess from WhatCulture, and here are the 10 best multiplayer games that aren't multiplayer games. Number 10. Uncharted series. Naughty Dog's iconic action-adventure series Uncharted really set the standard for what cinematic adventure games could be. From the massive action set pieces to the snappy dialogue and stunning environments, Uncharted tops the kinds of blockbuster movies that inspired it. It's precisely that summer blockbuster aesthetic that makes Uncharted so immediately accessible. Even if someone can't enjoy playing the game themselves, watching it is every bit as entertaining as watching a movie, if not more so. The platforming and gunplay are fast and dynamic by design, ensuring others won't have to sit and watch you turtle behind cover while slowly taking out enemies one at a time. If anything, the actual gameplay kind of outshines the spectacle-laden cutscenes. The pace remains consistent thanks to the balance of action sequences, puzzles, and cutscenes. And the puzzles are especially fun to solve as a group, just challenging enough that the player can appreciate others chiming in, but not so tough as to grind the pacing of the story to a halt. Number 9. FIREWATCH. Campo Santo's FIREWATCH is one of the easiest games to recommend to people who might not play so many games. As a fire lookout named Henry, most of the game boils down to simply walking and navigating dialogue options with fellow fire lookout Delilah. The first thing that makes FIREWATCH enjoyable with company is first and foremost its incredibly well written and performed story, even if it may not have the most cinematic presentation as a lot of games on this list. Second, as a so-called walking simulator, it's pretty perfect for passing the controller around. Sure, there may not be a whole lot in terms of exploration or player agency, but someone who's never touched a video game in their life can pick this one up and appreciate its relaxing nature and beautiful art style. The one thing it isn't, though, is a party game. FIREWATCH has a lonely atmosphere and emotionally heavy story, one best experienced with a loved one or small group of close friends. Anyone you feel comfortable shedding a tear or two around, because that's gonna happen. You'll be grateful for the emotional support after reaching the tragic twist at the heart of this story. Number 8. FROMSOFTWARE games. At first glance, it might seem like playing any of FromSoftware's infamously difficult games with an audience would be boring at best and humiliating at worst. I mean, what fun is it for anyone if you're stuck fighting the Dancer of the Boreal Valley for the 15th time? The repeated deaths, minimalist narrative, and regular backtracking doesn't exactly scream spectator sport. Or does it? Sometimes watching somebody play a FromSoftware game is kinda like being a fan of a sports team who suck. When you and your friends sit down in front of that game, you know what to expect, and it isn't good. But the heart is there. You love that team. None of you are ever going to quit that team no matter how bad things get. But once every several years, a miracle happens. Your favorite sucky team actually wins it all, and the celebration can be heard throughout the many hills of the land. That's kind of like what it's like playing a FromSoftware game as a group, except the wins come once every hour instead of once every few years. Regardless, having a group cheering you on and celebrating every little victory makes these games a lot easier on the psyche. Number 7. Until Dawn. While any of Supermassive's later games in the Dark Pictures anthology could be included on this list, their spiritual precursor Until Dawn still stands out as the best and most accessible of the bunch for group play. The traditional horror movie setup makes it immediately accessible for anyone at all familiar with the horror classics of the 70s and 80s, meaning it's easy for your non-gaming friends to join in the fun. The inclusion of recognizable film and TV actors also makes it easy to digest as the interactive movie that it's billed as. But it's not just the cutscenes and dialogue trees. The bulk of gameplay consists of gathering clues and exploring your environment, opening up informed discussion for how to progress. Just maybe shut up during the QuickTime events if you aren't on the controls. That'll end a friendship quicker than a blue shell in Mario Kart. Like any good horror movie, Until Dawn is just more fun to experience as a group. The fact that your choices shape the game's story, including who lives or dies, makes the experience one where everyone can contribute and enjoy seeing the movie unfold. Number 6. Super Mario Maker 2. If you don't already know, Super Mario Maker is exactly what it sounds like. You make your own side-scrolling Super Mario levels in any of a number of styles spanning the history of the series. And while making levels as a group could be fun, this entry is more about playing the levels other people have made. That's because people are freaking lunatics, and this game proves it. The games are also known for having some of, if not the most intense and difficult 2D platforming in the history of gaming. That's what happens when you release a construction kit to a community who've been playing, breaking, speedrunning, and mastering your games in every conceivable way since 1985. It turns out there are a lot of Super Mario experts out there, and they also happen to be sadists. Find the most ridiculous levels you can and then have a go. Place bets on who can make it to the end. Whatever you do, everyone will be crying into their hands when they first see the kinds of things that people have come up with. Number 5. Silent Hill 2. Any of the Silent Hill games are best experienced with others, if only to add some ease to the creeping dread that escalates as you go between save points. But nothing beats Silent Hill 2, considered by many the best in the franchise, and one of the best games of all time. The story provides an easy hook for players and bystander alike. Unlike the first Silent Hill, where your goal from the start is to find and rescue your daughter, Silent Hill 2 begins with a mystery, as main character James Sunderland is summoned to the cursed little town by a letter from his dead wife. From that point, your primary motivation is to find answers, both to the question of who sent James this letter, if not his supposedly dead wife, as well as the many more questions you'll encounter as you make your way through the town. Add to that the fact that one of the first characters you meet is a Bizarro-style doppelganger of James's wife, and like any good horror story, it's impossible not to want to know more. And you'll also be happy to have friends nearby when Pyramid Head shows up. Number 4. Telltale Games. There are a lot of Telltale games. The studio put out so much content so fast, their own market saturation is arguably what killed them. But in their relatively brief time, they were able to appeal to a wide array of people by using the same basic gameplay principles in all of their games. With the likes of Walking Dead, Game of Thrones, Batman, and Wolf Among Us under their belt, there's a Telltale game for just about anybody. While repeated playthroughs of their games have demonstrated that their content doesn't really change a whole lot based on player choice, it feels like it does. And that's really all that matters if you've gathered some friends around for a casual yarn adjacent to one of their favorite pop culture IPs. And it certainly helps that, regardless of their shortcomings, most of their games are genuinely really well written. It's not easy to add new canon to a story and world as thoroughly fleshed out as Game of Thrones, but they did. Their take on Batman is original and complex, and Tales from the Borderlands is one of the funniest games ever written. They may not hold up to repeat plays, but that's okay, some games are best enjoyed once. Number 3. Portal and Portal 2. Depending on how much or how little patience you have when it comes to video games, puzzle games can be best experienced with an audience. This is especially true of the Portal games, two stories so well written and performed that halting progress because you're stuck can easily cast a shadow over the entire experience. It isn't fun to turn grumpy in the middle of something so enjoyable. Conversely, playing with friends makes those moments you get stumped even more enjoyable. You'll all be scratching your heads, trying out a bunch of things, going into the trial and error cycle when all of a sudden somebody goes, "Hey guys, I've got a crazy idea." And more often than not, that's the idea that works. Valve of course realized this themselves when they added an entirely separate co-op campaign to Portal 2. Fortunately, the group fun of the single player wasn't compromised, and it proved to be even better than the original. Not to mention that they're comedies, and like most comedies, are best enjoyed with an audience. You'll laugh harder from inside jokes, cooperate to solve puzzles, and get high off those sweet, sweet hits of oxytocin. Number 2. Detroit Become Human. Like Telltale, developer Quantic Dream has been experimenting with the same basic formula for years, making narrative-heavy games with butterfly effect-like branching paths. Unlike Telltale, they've done so much more sparingly and with a lot more iteration and experimentation. Infamously, so many of their games come very, very close to greatness before torpedoing themselves with one or two really bad choices. Does anyone else remember the Matrix-style aerial kung fu fight against the internet at the end of Fahrenheit? If that sentence makes no sense to you, then it's worth a Google because it's way too much to explain here. Throw in the Jason memes that dogged Heavy Rain, and 2018's Detroit Become Human was arguably their first true success. The game is visually stunning, has a cohesive world that firmly grounds you in its overtly political narrative, and a truly fantastic cast brings its complex and sympathetic characters to life. On top of that, your choices are significant, and the game even includes a branching paths map where you can see where the choices you made have led you. Detroit is full of difficult choices with unpredictable consequences. Making those choices by committee eases the stress and makes the twists and turns even more compelling. Additionally, its themes might give you something to talk about afterwards. Number 1. Resident Evil 7 Biohazard. There's a reason why there are a bunch of horror games on this list, and the simple fact is, horror is just more fun with friends. While there are plenty of horror games that fall into this category, Until Dawn, Resident Evil 7 Biohazard, and Silent Hill 2 pretty much form the trifecta. Until Dawn is enjoyed like a classic horror, more fun gruesome than scary gruesome, and Silent Hill 2 provides a gripping mystery and a lot of spooky imagery, but definitely doesn't put up the frights like it did 2 entire, oh my gosh, decades ago. Resident Evil Biohazard gives us a little of everything from above while being one of the scariest games in recent memory. For added fun, play this one on VR and pass the controller around. Seeing your friends, especially your non-gamer friends, try to run and hide from evil family patriarch Jack Baker while fully immersed in a VR headset and headphones is where the real fun is. I subjected my best friend to this, and it's one of my favorite memories. That's the end of our list, but let me know down in that comment section what you reckon are the very best multiplayer games that aren't actually multiplayer games. As always, I've been Jess from WhatCulture. Thank you so much for hanging out with me. If you like, you can come say hi to me on my Twitter account where I'm @JessMcDonald, but make sure you stay tuned to us here for plenty more gaming goodness.